Hello, everyone. Welcome to Games, Guts, and Gore. I'm joined today by Mr. Ron Bonk. How are you doing, man?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Good, good. Absolutely, man. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. So Ron, always the first question I like to ask my guests: what was your first introduction to horror, and what about the genre drew you straight in?
Geez, you have to go a long ways back. When I was, I guess my first introduction would have been when I was, pretty young, and I would watch like Saturday morning cartoons, and then they would have, the cartoons would trail off, and there might be some live action stuff or like Soul Train, and then somewhere between noon and one, this monster movie matinee would come on locally, and they would show like a horror movie or a Godzilla movie, a lot of Roger Corman stuff. And I used to, that was like my favorite part of the day, probably of the week, to see what they're playing. I always kind of rooted for Godzilla movies, but definitely enjoyed the horror, and even there. I remember there's some Abbott and Costello meets Dracula or Hammer horror stuff. Um, and what drew me in, it's hard to say because I don't really recall, at such a young age what drew me in. I just liked horror movies. I liked being scared.
Yeah,
And then even as I got older and started exploring, horror beyond those, say the black and white movies like the Friday the 13th series and stuff like that. I remember being fascinated. Like I couldn't see them in theaters. My parents, wouldn't let me see those in theaters. But I remember there was a kid middle school, I think it was, started, and he had seen them, and he would tell me the plots, and I just remember being like fascinated. The plots I think were even better than what the movies were, or at least my
yeah.
imagination of what they were. And then I would sneak and watch them when they would come on like HBO and stuff like that. So it was horror and sci-fi when I was a kid. They just both were my favorite interest. I loved Star Wars. I loved acting out all that stuff. I remember loving Alien and Halloween um, and just being fascinated with the genre.
All the classics. So it's been
Yeah,
with you since the very beginning.
yeah. Since I was born.
So that is cool. And I mean, I'm the same way. Horror has definitely been something that has very much intrinsically become a part of me.
Mm,
Like, I don't think there was ever an age where it was really cut off. I mean, I wasn't ever when I was super young, I wasn't like exposed to like the crazy stuff, but like I
mm.
guess by that point it became a little more tame. I was seeing some of the '80s things like what my uncles and my mom were really into, like Friday the 13th,
Yeah,
Nightmare on Elm Street, all those good ones. So I mean, for me, like I definitely relate to that, and for me, Friday the 13th will always be that's like my comfort movie. I
sure.
put those on when I'm sick.
I saw Jaws actually in theaters. So my mom took us to see that, which is kind of surprising, but it wasn't like a Friday 13th movie. But yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, growing up with Friday 13th movies and Halloween first coming out is different than experiencing it today. And I especially, grew up during the 80s. I was born in 69, so that was like my, teenage years. And, there was a, big influence of horror. So if anything, that just like solidified, that love of the genre.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's like you grew up during like the golden age of horror.
Pretty much.
I gotta ask, and I was excited to delve into this one once I knew you were coming on the show. My first introduction to you was City of the Vampires.
Oh,
Me and
sorry.
my me and my cousin Christian, we always, that's something we really bond over throughout our whole lives is watching just horror movies whenever we're together. Um, and City of the Vampires was one of those horror movies one night. So it
Okay.
was your first feature film.
Yeah,
And you made that when you were super young. I mean, can you take me
pretty
back
young.
to what that original spark was for you? Like what
Um,
inspired you and what made you just, put your finger on the trigger and go for it?
there was one point I was finishing college. I didn't like the degrees. I didn't want to work in the fields, I'd been studying for, and had decided I was going to be a filmmaker, which I should have pursued from the start. It just didn't seem to make any sense. Like
Yeah.
I hadn't been shooting on film. I wouldn't have gotten into a good college. it didn't seem like a viable career. And then I was like, you know what, I got to do what, I'm going to really love doing the rest of my life after 4 years of college where I had like accounting degree and a criminal justice degree. And, uh, but I still wasn't sure, like how I was going to do it. Like I kept hearing, you need a minimum of 100,000. I was like, how am I going to convince people to give me, 100,000 shoot on film? And I don't know anything about
Yeah.
shooting on film. And then I found out there was this whole sub genre of a filmmaker shooting on analog video, which I had thought about. I remember it being like when I took like this extra year of school and took some film and video classes. I took like two film classes at another school that was nearby the school I was going to. And I remember saying to one of my fellow students, I was like, what if we shot on, like SVHS? And he was, oh, no, no, you can't shoot on that, can't shoot on that. But then sure enough, I found out like, right around when I'd either finished college or, I don't think I had yet finished. I was close to finishing that there was all these movies being made and getting distributed. They were getting released,
Yeah.
and they would have to do maybe like a film look on them, but they were shooting with VHS, 8 millimeter, or high eight, or SVHS, and then those who had some money or connection to a TV studio were shooting on like Betacam. So and then I found out they were shooting, as cheap as 3,500, or I think I even heard as low as 1,500. I'd gone to the seminar that John Russo was having about getting into the film business and getting into the B movie horror business, and Jared Bookwalter was there and he spoke and he was talking about these making these movies, and I was like, oh, I could raise that kind of money just from work and make these movies. So I quickly wrote these two scripts, City of the Vampires and another one called The Sayer, and it was kind of like this vampire hybrid type movie. And I liked that script better, but I was like, wow, it's gonna be my first movie. I hadn't shot anything. I had shot a video on the antique business, how to buy and sell your attic treasures or something like, or no, it's called What a Deal, how to buy and sell antiques. And so I hadn't really made a feature. I don't think I'd even shot a short. So I hadn't done anything narrative. And I was like, well, if I'm going to screw this up, I might as well do the script that I like, lesser of the two. So I did City of the Vampires, which I've always said in multiple interviews, like that was a mistake because it was so much work that if you're going to put that much work into a movie, you should start with a story that you love. It wasn't I hated the story, it was fine. But it wasn't like I said my top choice, at least at that
Yeah.
time. And yeah, it was just a super hard shoot. I decided to do every single part of the crew myself so I could learn, doing the lighting, the sound, the effects, camera work, directing, location, craft services, you name it. And I did learn a lot from it. I learned a lot distributing it too, about distribution. But I remember I lost like 20 pounds. I reached a point that I lost so much weight. I was like, I really got to start eating. I don't want to end up in the hospital. And then I lost my lead actor partway through. He was getting like flakier and flakier about showing up. So I fired
Oh wow.
him, and then his best friend was my main villain, so he, vampire there, so he quit out of support with him, for him. And then I got Matthew Jason Walsh involved thanks to JR, and my younger brother played the lead vampire. And I just forced it through and got it done, got it out there, and it came out as horrible as you expect a 90-minute feature with a one-person crew and no lights. I was shooting at night with like my headlights and my car, and but like I said, it did serve its purpose, and there's people like you who like it, so I'm glad you guys enjoy it. Originally, after I made my money back on it, I had made a good profit on it, actually so well. I shelved it for a number of years, and a lot of people asked for it. And then I saw that it was selling on eBay for like 100 or 200 bucks. And I was like, okay, I don't want anyone paying that much for it. I'll bring it back. And then I did. So, and now it's out there nonstop, pretty much. So,
Yeah, I think that charm, I mean, I think it shines through, like the fact that you were obviously very much using whatever you could and using, almost like these DIY methods to
Oh yeah.
tell this story and all that. Like it's obvious that that's what's being done, but I think it adds to the charm, and I think it adds like to I think it adds to the overall final product, where it's like, I don't know, you're still telling a good story and you're still telling it with your means, and it's impressive how you're able to still do it, like you said, with your car headlights shooting in the dark.
Yeah.
And it's cool, and it has that vibe. And like, I think it's especially cool how you kind of started there, and how your career kind of progressed, because you've been at it for a long time, longer than
Yeah.
most people in your position. So it's just like, it's really cool getting to see how where it started to where it is now. I think it's cool.
Thank you. Yeah, the one of the things you touched on, I think is true of a lot of the shot on video movies of the '90s, is that they're really rough, but this sort of love of film and filmmaking and of the horror genre, um, really comes through in those projects when you watch them. And that was one of the things I love about the Polonia brothers movies. Especially the early stuff, you could just, and Tim Ritter, you just tell how much, they're passionate about horror, and it comes through in the product, even if the product, like the effects are nowhere near the movies that they're paying tribute to.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, it was pretty much a test that, I had to live with. It's like it was like my student project, but instead of like, putting it on a shelf or putting it as an extra on a future release, I put it out for the entire world to see. And
It's cool. It's cool. One of those 90s, like, very low budget films that I always liked, that I also watched with my cousin. And it is just objectively a bad movie, but it's entertaining in its own sense. And I wish the director went on to like do more stuff and was persistent with it. But it's have you heard of Axum?
Excellent. How do you spell it?
AX and then space EM, literally just like Axum. It's this
I think so.
super low budget film. It's super funny. I definitely suggest checking it out. It's literally free on YouTube, and
Oh, okay. Oh,
it's just like, it's just funny. I think I'm always very, very entertained seeing how people can really work with nothing and make something, and I always
sure.
find that
That's
very,
a
very cool.
'90s shot on video movie then?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, awesome.
yeah, yeah. I
The
always
the
seek
the
those out.
the way you spelled it sounds like I could visualize seeing it. So I feel like I've heard about it or saw the artwork for it or something, but I've never seen the movie itself.
I'm sure you have. It is literally known as, I think it's literally like one of the worst rated Rotten Tomato movies of
Oh
all
wow.
time.
Oh,
Yeah,
got on
yeah.
Rotten Tomatoes. That's impressive.
But yeah, so I mean, kind of with all of that in mind, and how you've had to, really rig, and how all of City of the Vampires kind of came together, if you could revisit it today
Hmm.
with your experience and modern day tech and tools, what would you do differently? Would you restructure the story? How would you shoot it? How would
Um,
you do that?
yeah, I mean, it would be a complete revamp, I think. When I originally shot the movie, it was scripted for a guy looking for his daughter, and his wife made him promise, after he kind of cowardly ran away. She's like, she got real sick, and she ends up dying, but her deathbed request is that he goes back for her. um Maybe I would go back to that premise. It's hard to say. I have thought of a couple times about like trying to rewrite it and going back and making a better movie of it, but I don't think I love the plot that much. I like some struggles of the hero, and they do, have repeated, I guess, in other scripts I've done since and movies I've made. But yeah, I would. It's hard to say if it would be the same story. I might like uh, completely like revamp it. so it would only have like a thin sort of connection to that original plot. And then obviously, I would do it with a real crew and real equipment, and like nice lights and better microphones and better effects. I'd probably make it. It was a pretty gory movie. When I look back at it, sometimes like, oh yeah, it's actually pretty gory. I'm surprised I was able to pull off those effects, but I'd probably make it bloodier. And uh, uh, you mentioned it being very DIY. Like I remember I built even like the crane for that thing from like a
Wow.
kit. I bought like a VHS that I watched, and I bought this thing called the Shake Breaker, which was the same guy, I think, but he basically built and would sell that one because it was too hard to assemble. But anyways, I got sidetracked. So yeah, I would certainly make it I'd work with a bigger budget and stuff, but it's hard to say. I might make it like super gritty and raw because I felt like that was the movie I intended to make originally. It didn't quite accomplish, so maybe I would still want to do that. I don't think I'd make it like real slick and big budget Hollywood looking. I think I'd make it look more like something like Maniac or something like that.
Yeah. Still kind of holding true to that original nature with a little modern finish to it. I like that. That's cool.
Yeah, yeah. Still get down and dirty, but with just better equipment and more people, not by
Yeah.
myself. So,
Not a one man army. That's
so,
you kind of touched on it earlier too. I mean, you obviously started everything was VHS. You mentioned like that film, 100, $200 right on eBay. I mean, the collector market for these things for physical media really exploded. But now you're
hmm,
thriving in the Blu-ray market, which is
yeah.
super popular, especially amongst the indie horror community. What's a part of that kind of evolution of things that outsiders or newer creators might completely misunderstand?
Oh, you mean about paying those sort of prices for the stuff?
Paying those sort of prices, was there, yeah, just in terms of that charm, the prices, the
The
accessibility.
I mean, I guess if they really want to see something and they or they just want to own it, I don't, never begrudge them that, because if the title, I mean, a lot of these titles that they're buying and still paying high prices for are available, maybe through digital streaming. So part of that desire to own copies is they're like physical media collectors, and they like to have a physical copy on their shelves that they can show off
Yeah,
and or display the art, or just brag to their friends about, or their fellow collectors. um but if they're buying it for um because they just want to see the movie and there's no other way of seeing it, uh uh I can understand that, because I sort of had the same mentality, even like, like I don't support the bootleg market and bootlegging, but if there was a title, I remember that when the '90s Godzilla movies would come out and they weren't available over here, I'd buy them at like Chiller Theater on
yeah,
VHS, because someone would bootleg and have them. But when they came out, I bought them all on DVD, and then later got them all on Blu-ray. So I was like, all right, I will buy this title, and it was pretty cheap, probably 20 to 30 bucks. Every time they had a new one. But I'll make sure I support it again in the future with a legit copy. But I guess I'm getting a little sidetracked. The What would I tell them? I would say, I mean, if you really want to see it and that's the price you want to pay, then that's your call. If you don't want to pay that much or your budget's limited, then just keep, hitting up the distributors who put out that sort of stuff. That if it's within, if there's a top distributor for that particular movie, like a lot of rare kaiju movies that haven't come out. I'm pretty much leading the indie kaiju releases here in North America right now, so I'll get a lot of people who mention titles to me, and then I will look for those titles. I do
yeah,
take those requests very seriously, but a lot of 9 out of 10 times they're a dead end. But at least they hit me up so it could get a legit release, and
yeah,
then they could, the filmmaker and or their family or whoever is getting properly compensated, for the release, for the
yeah.
sales.
100%. Keep it going that way.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as we previously mentioned, you've been in this industry for a long time now. What do you think keeps you passionate about, distributing and making these movies after all these years when, I mean, most people have already burned out at this point?
Yeah, I haven't gotten bored at all yet. Sometimes when this on the directing side of things, sometimes when I finish a movie, I get, pretty burned out and I need some time to recoup before I can jump right in. But the distribution, for the most part, there can be frustrating periods where something's not selling as well, or I've certainly had some lean times. But I don't know, I just really haven't gotten bored with it. It's exciting to find a new one. I enjoy. I'm a big kaiju fan. Was a big Godzilla fan. Learning about this, indie ultra low budget side of things, which I suspect was out there, but I didn't know about, for
Yeah.
many years. Seeing those, like I've been working on this, syncing up the subtitles for "Wake Up the Death Treasure," and it's such a good movie. Like I love it so much. It's one of my favorite indie kaiju movies. Um, there's just that like excitement of discovering these titles, and then getting them out and sharing that excitement with the fans. I guess as long as the fans are supportive, um, and expressing that excitement, then I will
Keeps you
stay.
going.
Yeah, I'll stay energized within it. Yeah, it's not. It is my income, but it's how I make a living. But it doesn't necessarily feel like a job. Sometimes it does, but it doesn't always
Yeah.
feel like a job. It's just a lot of fun to do it and discover those titles and get them out there and have fans respond to them. I love hearing from someone who'll say that they really enjoyed a release.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have that deep passion for it, and I mean, you mentioned in the beginning, you had 2 degrees, right? You said in criminology and finance, right?
Counting, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah. So
I
I
did a
mean,
2 year in accounting and then decided I didn't want to be accountant. And I was able to transfer that to criminal justice field because there was this new degree, this white collar crime degree that was a mixture of it. And then I did that. And then I was like, oh, yeah, I don't want to do that either. So,
yeah. So I think that's cool though. You felt everything out and then just went with your passion. Did you ever? Probably more so towards the crime and the criminology side of things. But did you ever? I'm sure the accounting helped with running your own business and finance, but
accounting does help.
but did you ever take anything you learned from that and apply it to any of your films?
Yeah, certainly. The criminal justice stuff, especially early on. Um, when I wrote Clay, it had come from a discussion in one of my criminal justice classes about like what makes a good citizen and the idea that it starts at the home. There was this belief that too many parents were looking at the schools to raise their kids and teach them the values, and these studies are showing like if the values are instilled in the home, with the parents or the guardian, whoever, that created a better citizen. So that had stuck with me because I was always like, well, what would happen if you had a child who was raised by like a total like insane person? And so Clay was about this guy who was raised by this father who just hated him and told him all
Yeah,
these stories about who he was and who he really, like made up these stories, and and he believed him as an adult. He didn't eventually like outgrow him, and it was like he was told about Santa at a young age, and then here he was in his 20s and still fully believed Santa was alive. The sort of thing.
yeah, yeah,
Because he would tell him like that he didn't, he really had parent. He didn't have a mom. He would tell him, and he would say that he had dug him out of clay and formed him and breathed life into him, and so it's kind of a modern-esque Frankenstein, take on Frankenstein. And what did he find out through the course of the movie? Spoiler, that the mom had died in childbirth, and the father, who didn't even want to have a kid, just so resented this child's existence. So he was forced to raise them because it was not their deathbed promise, which is a
Yeah.
similar thing. I think I viewed mother figures so strong. It's hard for me to have a mother figure in place with a psycho. So it had to be the father figure who
Yeah.
was the negligent one. But so yeah, that came from the criminal justice degree, and then that extra year of school I took. I could have gotten a communications degree, but I just took whatever I want. I took like an English lit class, and I had read Frankenstein several times before, but I reread it in that fifth year for one of the classes, and I thought like, oh, what if, what would be like a modern take on Frankenstein? And so those two things from college, that I didn't use, say for a specific job in those fields, did come together to
For Clay.
influence a movie I made. Yeah.
Yeah. That's super cool. That's super cool. I always find like, you know, sometimes, especially when you're living in the moment, like something will feel like a waste of time or pointless or like a roadblock, but it does very oftentimes come back later and is, it feeds into
Sure.
something important, and it does lead to a success or something you're proud or passionate about. I always find those stories very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I did put it to use. It's a bit of a waste of money, but it was
Yeah,
also not a
absolutely.
complete waste. It did sit with me both consciously and subconsciously, and influenced, the stories that I told, at least, initially those first few years out of college, and still to today, I'm sure. Yeah.
Is there any scenes or moments in any of your films that, is a feels very significant and personally important to you that, some viewers might not realize that, you know, it has such an impact on the director?
That's a great question. I, I would have to see if I can think of one. You know, um, there's a lot of scenes, that I'm happy with, and there's a number of scenes that I'm not happy that I came out with. I mean, there is moments like I'd say in my most recent one, like House Shark, where there's some really, it's more on the humor side. There's some really funny moments that either remind me of childhood and playing like Jaws after seeing Jaws, and or could be simultaneously, just remind me of being, because House Shark was kind of, it was very collaborative in terms of, I hired this group that I had been working with on a number of projects and wrote the script for them. We were all good friends, and so there's a lot of joking on it going on set, and so if they did something funny on set, I would, and I heard it, because sometimes like I'd be, working on a shot or something, they'd be rehearsing and they would say something funny. I'd be like, oh yeah, use that. That's real funny, and it added a lot to the content, like, bloat the running time a little bit, but I'd be like, I don't care. Let's even, like if I had streamlined it in the scripting process to have, I don't know, like, these five lines get to the next point, and if they said something funny and it added like another five lines, I'd be
Yeah.
like, I don't care. I just want it to be in there, because so I'd see a scene and just it would remind me of, being on set and joking around with them, or being on a past set because some of the jokes came from past sets, and so it has, like I said, sort of that dual thing of, anywhere within my history of life to, of just living, and the things that influenced me, like Jaws is a big influence, and loving shark movies, and that movie is, so heavily a Jaws spoof, to, the stuff I was doing on set that was maybe not as real, I guess.
Yeah, a little more improvised. That's cool.
Yeah.
So, if you were to teach just a one-day workshop to, aspiring young filmmakers today, what's one exercise that would be a must that you teach them to help them understand the craft?
Um, there's a lot, so it's hard to pick one, but I guess I would start with the first one, is with when you're writing out your initial idea, to just kind of go wild with it. Try not to restrict yourself or worry about budget or worry about what other people are going to think. Just kind of let your mind, just stream out on the page, because you can reel all that stuff in back later. But if you stifle yourself early on, then you might never finish the script. And if you do finish it, you might finish something that's like just far too safe, or just, you're not as passionate or excited about. So, um, um, that would probably be my first bit of advice that I could think of off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. I actually, obviously, I'm not a filmmaker, but I've recently launched my own publishing company for comic books.
Oh, cool.
Um, and I write all of them, and it's all horror themed, and something I'm very passionate about, and I'm happy to be able to,
Awesome.
bring it in a business sense and make the stories and all the stuff that's in my head, come to life on the page. It's a very
Mm,
rewarding and a very gratifying experience. And
sure.
that was something that I had heard in the past, not put as well, but I've heard, just kind of, get your ideas on the page, start writing basically. Um, and it does help. I mean, like, just having exactly what you said, you can always reel the story in. So if you
Mm,
just put out, and for a comic book, it's obviously a heck of a lot easier because you're not worried about budgetary, concerns like how am I going to make this work. But like in that sense, it's even more of a great thing to do to help your story stand out and feel
sure.
different, feel unique, and feel more
Mm,
like you. Is just like go crazy with it because you
yeah.
can. What's stopping you, especially if you're independently
It can be
produced and
any
don't have exactly.
any genre you can do it, and not just horror.
Yeah,
Uh,
100%.
be, people, they want colorful movies. They don't want something boring and dull and seen, that they could see 1,000 times everywhere else. So, and another piece of advice that you made me think of would be, and this is on the opposite side of the spectrum, is definitely like to be patient, because if you're in the field long enough, it could take 20 years, but you'll eventually become a pro. You eventually become among the top in that field, and you'll be an expert, and maybe the top, voice on it. So, you're starting off this comic book business. It could take right off, and I hope it does for you, or it could struggle for many years. I mean, the distribution did well to start. I even though I came in on the tail of VHS, I did pretty well with some titles, and then I hit some bad points, especially like the Great Recession was really rough, and it was a real struggle to get through that. I ended up burning up a lot of business debt to get through it, and it was funny. I think it pulled out of my initial business debt to get started, and then the recession hit, and then
Another
went
set
back
of
in it. So I had to climb out of that again. And but if you can stay with it and be patient and make it work, that it will eventually work. Even if you don't, I had, like I said, no filmmaking knowledge, no distribution knowledge. I was in a field that, outside of selling stuff in the antique business, as like a vendor working for my dad, I didn't really have anything in sales. And it took a long time. It was like going to school, on the spot, and learning in short little chunks and hard lessons. But it will be successful if you can last.
I think that's a very inspiring sentiment that I will definitely take and carry with me, and I'm sure a lot of the other creatives in the audience and stuff will resonate with as well, because I think that's a harsh reality that crushes a lot of creative people. Is they do end up succumbing and giving up, and sometimes, I mean, you
Sometimes I
know
have to. Yeah, I mean, like
yeah,
family
exactly.
gets, especially when people start having family, like they get married and have kids. Um, your priorities will change. You can be like, oh, why does it have to change? But they really do change. Like your kids and your wife or your husband, or your significant other will, be more important. It's hard to believe it'll be more important than the thing that you're currently passionate about. But maybe you can find a balance and make them both work, or
Yeah,
it all.
absolutely. As we're kind of wrapping up, I think a great note to slowly end on is, as we've mentioned many times already, you've been at it a long time. If someone
Mm.
told you 30 years ago that your films would still be discussed and you would still be, I mean, you'd be going at it better than ever, harder than ever, decades later, how do you think your younger self would react to that?
He wouldn't be surprised at all. No, I'm just kidding. I think he would be, if he had finished some of the projects and was told that, like if I had finished City of the Vampires, was told that, I'd be like, City of the Vampires? But I think the belief was always and still is that, um, that I would eventually make something that would break through. I mean, the closest I've come, I guess, is House Shark, which has done, very well and been released all over, and it's got a big following. But I still haven't had that, mainstream breakthrough. Um, but I don't think I'd be fully surprised because I know that I would stick with it until it did work. I know that I would keep getting better as a filmmaker. My cat's scratching the thing, man. And I always still believe that, make something that is, on that high tier of whatever genre, that it's in. Yeah, I guess to answer you, not fully surprised, maybe pleasantly surprised or happy to hear
Reassured.
or excited about the future.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So, I mean, on that note, are there any upcoming or current projects that you're allowed to talk about and share with us today?
um So I don't have anything I'm directing for a little bit. I've just finished a move to the Chicago area, and so I had to put. I was hoping to do a production this year, but I had to put that on hold to finally get back into doing a feature. I've done some shorts, so I'm going to be working on some. I do have a number of screenplays done, but there's one more I want to do that is probably the one I want to shoot first if I can. We'll see how good the script comes out, but I am always producing. And so we currently we have Indiegogos running all the time. I like to supplement the productions with these Indiegogos. And I got a bunch with like Josh Gray's like Carnivore and Toy, and I've got some with Matt Jasley. We're just funding Open right now, which is about a cursed umbrella. People can hop on that with add effects using hand gestures. uh, People can jump on that and support that and be a part of that. He's, I think, an underrated filmmaker. He's well known within the shot on video,
Yeah,
but I think he does a really good job with low budget, with very low budgets. And I have Stabby Chic with Evan Jacobs, who I refer to as a very minimalist filmmaker. I love that he's like, he started in the shot on video era, but you can still feel that love of movies and filmmaking and the genres he's working in with every single project. Like he's never lost sort of that youthful energy. And What else we have coming up? Open, Established Chic. There's a new one I'm going to launch this week called Emotional Support Shark. It'll be on Indiegogo. Hopefully, people support it. It's Mark Polonia. He works a lot with Very Scary Productions, which is Tim Hatch and Jeff Kirkendale. So they're kind of like, three-man team right now. So I want to try to give them all equal credit because they're all super important part of that
yeah,
process. But Mark obviously has he's the big name. He has the cult status. Has been doing it for such a long time, and we've worked with Mark in so many projects. So I'm excited about that. So those, any of the recent Indiegogos, love the support. If they're live, grab a perk if you can, but especially the new ones. Things are a little tougher right now with the economy. We're right in the middle of a government shutdown, and
yeah.
jobs are scarce. So it's a tougher time for distribution and raising money. So I understand if you can't support, just give it a share. But if you can support, awesome. We'd love to have you aboard. So,
Absolutely, absolutely. So, other than the Indiegogos, what is the best way for the audience to best support you?
Support me. I mean, hop on over to the SRS Cinema Store, srscinemastore.com. Support the new releases. That helps the filmmakers who, where we not only do I produce movies, I sign movies, as I mentioned earlier, where those filmmakers are often collecting a royalty off the sales. So getting over there and picking up units. I got a lot of great titles, a lot of recent stuff. If I'm releasing it, I love it in some form. Yeah, I might release it because it's really bad and I love it, and I might release it as really great and I love it, and anywhere in between. Or get on the streaming channel, especially Tubi. We do really well with them. It's free. You just got to watch some ads, supporting on those titles on Tubi and letting Tubi know to keep carrying those titles, because we, all the indie filmmakers in this ultra low budget level will run into situations where they start to get like edged out and squeezed out of those companies, and those companies, will build their model off of these and then drop them when Hollywood comes swooping in, but encourage them to keep those movies intact. If there's filmmakers you love or movies you love, let them know. Watch them on there so the filmmakers can make some money off them. Let your friends know. Let your family know. Post about it on social media, and let the streamers know too. So,
I will be linking all of Ron's Indiegogo's that he's all involved in and dabbling in down below, so make sure you guys check that out. And I hope to catch you all in the next one. As I said, guys, thanks for watching. And Ron, you're a great guest, and I appreciate you joining us.
thank you. My pleasure.
A podcast of terror, a haunting delight.